I want to thank Leo Antunes, Claudio Felix, and Films Historicos for the tips that helped build this video. Welcome to more content. Today we're going to connect the dots of a story that the mainstream media prefers to treat in isolation, as if they were just everyday events, but they're not. If you think that freedom of speech is just an abstract concept and only matters to journalists and politicians and has nothing to do with ordinary people, this video will be a reality check. History teaches us a universal and unchanging rule. The more the state encroaches on the freedom to speak, the faster it encroaches on your wallet and your property. Censorship never comes alone. It brings with it loss, unemployment, and ultimately, a direct attack on private property. Today, we are going to analyze 3 shocking reports, not voices in my head. This has never been a conspiracy theory. The news, facts, published by the mainstream media itself, which is one of the parties responsible for this system being put in place here and for leaving the public completely asleep. First, how Brazil joined the select club of authoritarian regimes by applying restrictions and CCA to platforms like Discord, aligning itself with countries like China, Iran, and Russia. That means we are the same as them. At least they govern the same way. The second is the inevitable economic impact of this ecosystem, an ecosystem of legal uncertainty and state intervention, exemplified by mass layoffs and the shutdown of huge industrial sectors like the recent case of the Gerdau factory in Pernambuco, the state where I live. Third, the final consequence of the collectivist mindset. When the state decides it has the right to take property from citizens under the justification of public interest, things are going to get rough. And if you want to understand where the country is being taken and how this affects your life, your job, and your assets, stay with me until the end. And since you can't run on an empty stomach, grab your chocolate pudding and a cup of tea right now, and let's start our segment, Lords of the World.
Lords of the World.
Let's get to the first point. Recent reports have highlighted an alarming statistic. Brazil has now been included in global reports and the list of countries that have imposed blocks, restrictions, or strong regulatory pressure against popular digital platforms such as Discord and X, formerly Twitter, as well as other communication apps. And who behaves like this? Who can Brazil be compared to in these surveys? If you said China, Iran, Russia, or North Korea, you got it exactly right. Think about that for a second. Historically, Brazil has always been seen as a Western democracy with strong constitutional guarantees regarding freedom of the press and freedom of expression. Article 5 of our Constitution clearly states that freedom of expression is guaranteed and anonymity is prohibited, and that intellectual, artistic, scientific, and communication activity is free, regardless of censorship or license. However, in recent years, under the justification of protecting democracy, combating misinformation, or regulating the digital ecosystem, judicial bodies, especially the gods of Olympus and the Superior Electoral Court, aligned with the rhetoric of the federal government, began to adopt extreme measures. We can mention the 3 main ones. The first is the summary blocking of accounts and profiles of journalists, parliamentarians, and citizens without transparent due process. Threats of total suspension of entire platforms in cases where they are required to account for and provide profiles of journalists. The third, and no less important, is the imposition of million-dollar fines on technology companies that try to challenge secret orders. When a country starts to appear in the same group as authoritarian nations in terms of controlling the flow of information, the global warning light comes on. In these communist and dictatorial regimes, controlling the narrative is the absolute priority of the state. You can't criticize the party, you can't question the court, you can't disagree with the official dogma. And what is the argument they always use? We're doing this for your safety. But the truth is that censorship never protects the citizen. It protects those in power from being held accountable by the citizens they are supposed to serve. Many people who haven't realized it yet ask themselves, but what does restricting apps or censoring the internet have to do with the real economy, with the factory in my city? And the answer, my brother, is simple: legal uncertainty. Capital is cowardly. Money doesn't stay where there is no legal certainty. where laws change overnight by the decision of a single office, or where investors run the risk of having their businesses blocked by government decrees. When the world looks at Brazil and sees a hostile regulatory environment, authoritarian and predictably stable, investments disappear. Capital is cowardly. And what happens to Brazilians when investments disappear and the economy slows down? Let's move on to the second fact in our analysis. That fiction article is on your screen. Gerdau lays off workers en masse as it downsizes factory operations in Pernambuco. Have you noticed that they always use this play on words? They're adapting to changes. It's a smart change. It's an adaptation. But when you look closer, what's really happening is the company shrinking and laying people off. They're even operating with a smaller cash flow. Gerdau is one of the largest Brazilian multinationals in the steel industry. It confirmed a mass layoff of about 170 workers and the shutdown of the steelmaking and rolling sectors at its Aço Norte plant in Recife. The factory had to mothball entire sectors and streamline operations to focus only on basic products in an attempt to maintain profitability. The steel industry is the country's barometer. If the steel industry is streamlining operations, laying off workers, and shutting down production areas, it's because construction, infrastructure, and industrial consumption are at a standstill. In fact, my brothers, stop and think. In your city and the cities you usually visit, have you seen major developments being opened? Or are you just another witness like I am? More and more companies, including traditional companies from our region, have been closing their doors one after another. It's no wonder that we've already mentioned in other videos that more than 300 major Brazilian manufacturers have already moved to Paraguay. And it's easy to track these big ones. But Mr. Zezinho's workshop, Mr. Tiquinho's bar, those, my brothers, have been closing their doors since the days of Sunga Sungamonga, and no one is doing anything to help these people. On the contrary, the situation has only gotten worse, with more taxes, more regulations, and so on, etc., etc. The bill for this government mess always falls on the worker. A spendthrift government, obvious inflation, high interest rates to contain inflation, and excessive intervention in the economy create a suffocating environment. Gerdau in Pernambuco, in the northeast that supported Lula, is just a symptom of a bigger problem. When large industrial groups start to shrink and cut jobs, the ripple effect hits small business owners, service providers, and self-employed workers. Censorship and authoritarianism drive away foreign capital, economic interventionism destroys local businesses, and the end result is unemployment, recession, and the loss of purchasing power for the population. If we have already seen the encroachment on freedom of expression and the impact on economic freedom, we now reach the final stage of the authoritarian scale, the attack on private property. Socialist philosophy and state collectivism are based on a fundamental premise. The individual owns nothing. Everything belongs to the state, and it generously allows you to use certain property until it decides otherwise. This is typical of communism. Look at this recent report published by the Tempo Novo portal. It appears on your screen saying abandoned houses and empty lots will be taken. That's right, even if they were legally purchased, they will be taken from the owners by the city hall to become public housing. Look how beautiful that is. But actually, it's a horror movie. The report details. As for municipal decrees and programs, there are examples of measures adopted in capitals like Vitória and Espírito Santo under the pretext of urban rehabilitation or fulfilling the social function of property. I had already talked about this a lot here with you. This whole social function thing for property, my brother, this is creating an administrative mechanism so that the government can, with this flimsy excuse, take possession and seize these private properties, houses and lots considered vacant or underutilized. The official narrative always sounds nice. Let's take what's abandoned and turn it into social housing, but now let's look at the fine print and the precedent this sets. When the state arrogates to itself the power to define what is underutilized, when it imposes an escalating property tax, which crushes the owner until he can no longer pay, and when it creates administrative rules to seize private properties. The message sent to society is devastating. your property is not truly yours, period. Often the property is sitting empty or the lot is undeveloped because the owner doesn't have money at the moment to build due to the economic crisis. The same crisis created by the very government that wants to take it. Other times, and this happens a lot in Brazil, the property is in a family probate process, which is extremely bureaucratic and gets stuck in the state courts for years. No one can touch it. Something that could be resolved in a month or two literally takes years before the person or the heirs can do anything. Then comes the state itself, which blocked the economy and bureaucracy and says, since you didn't use this property the way I want it, now it's mine. Think about how absurd that is, my brother.
But that's exactly what's happening.
That, my brother, is the heart of the socialist model.
It starts by taking away your right to speak on social media. Then it destroys your job with disastrous economic policies. And finally, it comes to your house, your land, to the fruit of your entire life's work. The fact that's being shown here, for those who still haven't understood, is that everything happening here is connected. They're all part of the same domino effect, and we can highlight 3 of them as well. The first, without freedom of speech, you can't report the abuses of those in power or criticize the arbitrary decisions of the court. Second, without economic freedom, companies go bankrupt. Multinationals like Gerdau lay off workers en masse, and the country becomes poorer. Third, without property rights, you become a mere tenant of the state, subject to losing your assets if you don't meet the demands of the bureaucrat in charge. When we see Brazil being mentioned alongside regimes like China, Russia, and Iran in terms of digital restrictions, we're not seeing an isolated incident. We are witnessing the consolidation of a governance model where the state is huge, controlling, and punitive, while the citizen is small, watched, and exploited. I can tell you, without fear of being wrong, that the more censorship, the more harm, the more control, the more poverty, the more interventionism, the less freedom. It is essential that we are active voices in the defense of individual freedoms, the free market, and the sacred respect for private property. Share this video so that more people wake up to this reality and see how the daily news are puzzle pieces that just need to be put in the right place so you can see the final picture. This is our job. Our video ends here. If you recognize the importance of work like this, don't let us be erased by the algorithm. I'm counting on your help, my brother. Share it, show it to other people who believe in the media's narratives and think these news stories are just everyday things. They never were and never will be. They are small fragments of the same picture showing the terrible image of communist socialism being implemented in our country. May God protect each one of you. May God protect our nation, and may people wake up. Hugs, my brothers. I'm out.